Schönen guten Abend, wahrscheinlich zum derzeit heißesten Tag des Jahres. Und es ist leider hier herinnen ohne Klimaanlage und ohne derzeit noch Jalousien, weil die kaputt sind, ist es etwas tricky. Aber ich hoffe, Sie sind Hitze gewohnt oder schaffen den heutigen Abend. I'm very glad that Francesca Torzo is now today coming from Genoa again to have the lecture. It's the last lecture before the summer. The next is the opening of the exhibition from Sauerbuch-Hatten. It's on the 6th of July at 7 o'clock. So if someone is interested, you are invited to come on the 6th for the opening. Thank you very much for coming, and I wish you a nice lecture, and maybe after the lecture we can discuss about your projects and then to drink something, okay? Yeah.
Can you hear me? Good. So, Arno, thank you. And it is a good evening. We met again last time. And I see faces I do not know. I see faces. Anna, hi. I also see that there are some students, and I will make the talk in English that may have some nuances of Italian. So if something is not clear or you not appreciate, you stop me and you say, speak slower or be clearer. And it's a real honor because it takes a lot of commitment and endeavor. The work that Arno and his team are doing since a lifetime, which is to promote culture and confrontation, not in commercial way, not in fancy way, but always seeking for content and for questions that may be alive for every kind of age and practice experience. Every part of community. So first is a felt thank you to Arno, the institution out, for the chance I've been given, with no real merit, to screen and also then offer to public scrutiny my thoughts. So it's going to be a conversation, not presenting in exhaustive, in extensive way, 9 projects. Some of which are built, and some are on the way to be built, some maybe never going to be built. It's more to follow a flow, to share questions I believe are worth, and you may disagree, and that's the beauty of the world, that there is diversity. And so we start. Just to handle technology. Day by day, the title of the exhibition is not non-casual, non-accidental. Day by day, we renew commitment to the practice, to the teaching, and to the research, because somehow they all, we discover, contribute to sharpen the thoughts and make the attempt to build a public discourse. Is it relevant to have a voice in the place in a magazine? Totally boring, non-interesting, I believe. While it is a gift to find the patience to every day refresh your own questions, and don't be too self-confident, don't be too self-accomplished with your researches. Day by day has that meaning, and that is why we, thanks to Arno welcome and freedom he offered, we brought here all the atelier, showing failures as much as some achievements, because it is a practice, not trivially day by day, but it is a practice of patience and commitment. And also day by day, we discover the wonder, not in terms of a fairy tale, literally the wonders of the world, the real. There is all the room of the silks that I imagine you all have visited, that are just small gazes, photos taken with the iPhone by an amateur, which is me. And it is my way of looking at the world, and what I constantly discover is that there are unpredictable interrelations among spatial situations that relive memories of lives we have not lived directly, but we may have lived through literature, to stories of friends. They may be also lives of other cultures, other places, but we can recognize them and they are alive. Building is one of the oldest human activities, always alive, in transformation. I would say always new, as it expresses the limits and possibility of alternative societies. Humans began to settle and form the first villages around 9,000 before Christ. And surprisingly, these settlements were dispersed on the hills of Syrian desert or on the mountains of Anatolian Iran. Surprising, they did not settle in the lowlands, where one would imagine easier condition to inhabit, because the mountain's altitude offered the natural habitat for farming sources, as wild grasses, as goats, sheep, cows and pigs, together with an abundance of water. From these reflection notes by Fernand Braudel, a French historian, so I'm quoting the researches of an historian, we may observe how the transformation from a nomadic society to a sedentary one, which is named the Neolithic Revolution, so when we became kind of human, civilized human, was not a single historical event, rather a slow movement of adjustments, where new social behaviors arose by weaving with existing ones, gathering around some first settlements. Similarly, some millennia after the first collective settlements around the farming sources up on the mountains of Fertile Crescent, the construction of the first cities began in the neighboring Mesopotamia lowlands, where there were conditions for exchange of goods and movement of people, probably absorbing rising population and the growth of different needs. We have all a history of migrations, exchanges, and movement. Cities are born from the mazes of roads, of land and roads of water. The roads we walk today, the squares we cross, just out here, the houses we live in, recount thousands of years of geology. You can read. If it was a muddy land, it was the flow of a glacier glowing slowly. If it was a clash of Europe or Asia, because humans settled there. Furthermore, the cities and roads we live in tell how humans decided to settle in a landscape and how, over centuries, societies made decisions to confirm, alter, mostly parts of them. The transformation of European cities, which is what I know better, rarely contradicted the initial settlement, at least until after the First and Second World War, as more often they rather confirmed the pre-existing and architectural structures, building and growing on them. In fact, building serves and reveals life. We are here in Hasselt, in Province Limburg, and we are in Belgium. It is a soft land of muds and was formed by waters, and the medieval city consolidated the meandering of the waters. And there is here, as you see, a resembling island in the urban textile. It is a Begijnhof, which is a specific urban typology which was diffused in the north of Belgium and Flanders, and it was a city within the city, held by women at the border of society, which was a border of houses with inside orchards and a church, not entitled to give sacraments, but they were referent for society because they were teaching, they were also tainting textile, they were healing. Very intelligent women. Since its construction in the 18th century, the citizens of Hasselt have protected the integrity of the Beguinage, the Begijnhof, an Innsbruck architectural complex of houses stitched around a garden and a church. And the church you don't see in the model because it was a victim of friendly fire during the Second World War. It was born, as said, as a city within the city. In time, the citizens have built new structures around this Beguinage with different scopes. A building devoted to production, in the case of the gin factory, which is the ochre building in the model, and to social representation, as is the case of the museum built in 1958 by engineer Gustav Daniels, that you see, which is in this Pompeian red color. All of these buildings not only preserved the continuity of the built border around the garden, but they also adopted the urban posture of the Beguin's houses. These are the Beguin's houses in the photograph, which are characterized by almost blind walls toward the street, and here you see that they open in a filigree of windows towards the garden. Z33 House of Contemporary Art Extension also observe this non-authorial wisdom of time past. On the front, a solid continuous brick wall, 60 meters long and 11 meters high, faces the street, and the only three openings are niches of shade embroidered by plants, a breath of the city. On the back, a dense score of windows facing the garden takes on the rhythm of the existing. The enduring act of reconfirmation of the identity of the Beguinage without reproducing the architectural language of another epoch makes real what people found valid and worthy of preservation. Somehow, it expresses the innate need of people to belong to lengths of time that expand beyond the lifespan of one individual being. That need to feel part of something bigger than just ourselves. A building is a building. It's not an object. We are not sculptors. I don't believe that. I have the right from my position. A building is not an object. Neither I think it is a political or a social experiment. Sorry. It has weight, it has size, it stays in place for decades, sometimes for centuries or millennia, and comes to form part of an existing anthropic context, as we believe we had just to introduce a mosaic tile in the built border of the Beguinage extension building within a chain of brick buildings. Existing brick buildings all around, and our tests of the bricks, making rooms. We proposed we read a mosaic tile in the city, meaning a city is made of buildings, and a building made of rooms. Rooms which would vary in proportion, so people could name them. The tower, small room, le lac, the lake, the bridge. And people still use it in this way, the high tower. Rooms that vary for conditions of light and shadow proportion, so that even if there is a blackout, there is a quality. Shadow is not bad. Light is not good. Light and shadow are one same thing, two elements making one thing. tonus, tone, means the quantity of light and shadow of one color, also in one color. Tone is also the distance between two semitones, so distance between notes in music. And there is something more. We remember, and we can invent memories. Hustle to historical center, French palaces, a modernist museum, or Italian northern villas. Wandering through streets, alleys, rooms, courtyards, other rooms and other courts and other alleys, people do recall familiar images, familiar as a folk melody or a famole can be. Isn't it simply wonderful how our mind recomposes in unpredictable ways experiences that our senses gathered just a few moments before together with other experiences that are far away in time and space, and that we keep archived in truly unknown ways. As you see, we are wandering around the building, and I wish this to be a flow. We created an alternating scenography of indoor and outdoor spaces where sometimes you encounter the existing context, but then suddenly you are again in another building, a building that you know, but that you don't yet know. It may be a building of strong enfilade, of dramatic enfilade, of bridges, of axes, but it can also be a building, remember, which is of very familiar domestic spaces, views where you rest with almost a central windows, or a courtyard, an entrance patio, a tree, a fountain. What do I remember? But I would ask, what do you remember? A building in the city, rooms in a building, so simple what we proposed. All diverse in light, but how to do it? We started making those traces, and so the discipline began orthogonal on the existing building, orthogonal on the Geneva Museum, and then a reasonable set of parallel lines that would give a reasonable, making sense, rational space for living. And then decision of a fold to accompany and remember another fold that we have here from the Gym Museum, so we could create a space within the garden, and a fold along the street so that we would continue, accompany a peaceful walk of citizens along the walkside. It means we don't create a step and a shadow. We take decisions which are physical, but we're responsible for the non-physical of people. And then, I'm sorry, we developed all an ensemble of rooms. You see there is a ground floor, so the entrance is through a courtyard. Also we have delivery through a courtyard, and then we have a interior courtyard that you discover only once you're in, and then you have possibility of meandering around, percouring in this way. You have here a tower, you overlook these spaces, and you go down and you pass around the staircase, you meander, you can cross here, or you enter and you can take this way and take these rooms and discover another perspective, or pass in this, which is a Ditoren, in this way. So it is an elongation of time through the contiguity of spaces and their interrelation. There is a floor in between, which is all developing along the facade, taking on the rhythm of the beguine of houses, so that the people working there at Z33, which is that is a cultural institution, could bring with them the memory of their walking around the windows, and so we translated it. And then we have a first floor, and this is not dissimilar to the existing building, a public building built as a museum that then is part with the extension building. Basically now the gallery has 2 wings, and the public realm develops on 2 floors, which are connected. So you can flow one building with 2 wings. And here you see that there are wider scale. So there is this room, which is Le Lac, where you encounter again the beguine of interior landscape of the garden, which is 19 by 18 meters. And then you have this very long view, which changes with the perspective of the existing. And to make this building, we had literally to invent the tools, because it is an open tender competition, which was with 500 competitors, then selection of 27, cut down to 6, and one winner with unanimity, still non-explicable why. Then we had fast building permit, we had fast the preliminary design, and then we got very much stuck into the definitive and tender phase, because it's complex. Public building, main building of Hasselt, which is almost has 70,000 inhabitants. It's quite tiny, but has a lot of ambition and a lot of political ambition. So there were a lot of interests, not always converging in such a public building. And so the tender was stumbling over rebuilding up some loose agreements which were getting loose, as said, and also in proving that it was feasible. And as you can see from this set of images, the construction is quite standard, a part of the construction for experimental jointless facade. And that was a trick. The budget here was 1,650 or 700 per square meter. It's like social housing, no? It's very tight. And a lot of things were customized. And also to the students, I would strongly invite, yes, it's feasible, you just need to think and find solutions in dialogue with these wonderful people. Christoph, Daniel, Jasper, Michael. So to always work side by side, never be lazy, and on the spot, find a solution that can welcome habits, fear, laziness, and come with a better solution, which is always technical and cultural, to make things feasible. We have to protect people. So what did we do? We made a lot of experiments, and we can come back to the facade, but maybe it's more interesting with the drawings, executional of the exhibition, and also with some prototypes. And we also made a lacunar ceiling, which is load-bearing for 1 meter 60, like me. The beam, just it is 40 millimeter, so less than your iPhone at the bottom, and 120 at the top, means you have only 1 bar down, and turning the bars around, and it's not a pre-compacting concrete normal. So we had to invent very poor tools, how to shake and spread the pouring of it after failing with the first casting of the diamond ceiling, and to invent ways to vibrate from the bottom, so it would go right. And all this construction so has, as you see, a battlefield of failures, and finally, with great joy, a success, even if it has probably nothing of appealing, this image, but it is extremely appealing, because here we were able to make sign competitors' companies of mortar all a technical data sheet, which colleagues know it's quite a hell to make them sign as their competitors, and allowed us to achieve a calm detail that you see after. But first, when we were building and the contractor was used to always be poor of means and always be the only responsible for the timing schedule, was to hang in the office of the builder the photo model of the model 1 to 10. So we could always remind the promise we took, the commitment we took. So always reminding, and those are the photos of the building site. But every time we're going back there and reminding, but of course, on the other hand, with pencil and phone all the time. This lacunar ceiling I was mentioning before, which it's really to complement enormously the builders, and the building team was very tiny. And this is very important because you hear me talking here, and of course the architect has the responsibility of proposing visions, of negotiating and bringing together contrasting needs, but the architect is no one. Is no one without the client, is no one without the builder, is no one without the collaborators team, is no one without masonryman, the carpenter, even the cleaning team at the end. Everything is needed. And this should be reminded because the architect then has to keep everybody peaceful and proud. So we brought letters. And for that I really do believe that there is a need for a cultural and a technical maturity in the profession, with an empathy towards both present reality and past culture. Showing these drawings maybe has a bad time with my sentence. I don't think I am an example of this maturity I wish for, but I think that being able to try to talk Flanders and write in Flanders, making the effort to note all the fears of this terrible lazy water that simply sneaks everywhere, and still reminding we have to be delicate in this context because we are honored to be here building in this beautiful beguinage matters. So please take my words not as overloading my own self, but as true values that me and we move towards. In my experience, all tools truly already exist, but they may have been forgotten or disguised. The tools to build belong to a present living society, but the past offers us way to think. I was in Ercolano, where it came the idea of this jointless brick facade. But then I was also in Cadoro, and then I was also in Ghent. It is not true that human beings are the problem today or always. Human beings are good and bad, but they also did a lot of good. And we should build up on what is worth, not in what is bad. I do believe that human facts are specific, since cultural codes and political agreements, as well as the technique and availability of means and material, are specific to an historical period and cannot be reproduced. Roman villas, opus incertum, opus reticulatum, opus mixtum, they have depth of meters, a depth necessary to anchor myriad of small stones, or bricks in a mass of cementitious conglomerate, implying a process that is completely non-feasible today. And yet, we may translate something of the essence of such a structure into an architecture of the present day. We may translate its significance with present means. Mortar Weber, Omnicol, all companies you know. On the west of Riviera Ligure, along the Roman road Villa Aurelia, a young doctor from Bergamo bought a vastness of lands, which were too poor of humus to be cultivated. And there he raised marine hospices for children, enlightened by those Risorgimento views, which were kind of visionary. And the construction began in 1895, and the buildings were built in the character of city palaces, in continuity with that civilization of palaces as named by Professor Poleggi, which was a Genoese historian, referring to extraordinary architecture supported by Rembrandt in Genova, when enlightened entrepreneur invented palaces to house represent their own culture, expressing both pragmatism, the exploitation of the terrain, and festiveness in the scenography. The residential project we are now busy with, Villa di Plinio, belongs to this culture of palaces, of this festivity representation. City costumes expressed in the vertical score of the facades, where the pilaster rhythm of urban walks recurs, combine with the imaginary of an idleness built through the artifice of the sequences of terraces and loggias and hanging gardens. The pilasters are translated into reinforced concrete elements, punctual structures that allow for their slenderness diverse spatial arrangements different from floor to floor without compromising the transfer load. And this is this twin set of the pillars, so it changes in this way at every floor or depending on the combination, thanks to that core of steel that you saw before. So it's a dry construction retuning ferrocemento, translated. The search for this extremely slender size comes, of course, from constraints of urban regulation, of heritage, and also of budget for building and need for business plan. So maximal living height, 272 centimeters, with a minimal construction height, 306 centimeters. This means that we have ribs which are 4 centimeters, that the slab is 6 and 8 centimeters, that the pillar is 10 centimeters. How to do respecting fire and in salt context. That's the research that you see. And this dance program of almost 9,000 square meters is arranged on 8 floors, as you may better see on this level, of which 2 are underground, 2 are half above ground, making a basamento, and then develops on floor plus an attico, a crowning. And it is 9,000 square meters, barely perceivable. You only perceive 3 floors, and that learning from Genova, belonging to the context. Here you see the facade facing the sea, and this is the top view, where you see the labyrinthian articulation of the building, which is a building of gardens, which again is not something we're inventing, it is general tradition. It just has a more exotic flavor, reminding also Palazzo Cnosso. And here you see better. We have Via Aurelia. I don't know if any of you is familiar with the Roman road on the Ligurian coast. And we have those hills, this Punta dell'Olmo, this Punta dell'Aspera, which are surprisingly wild hills arriving wilder to the sea because it was an auspice thanks to this enlightenment of the entrepreneur of Risorgimento. Then became religious property, so that made it kind of protected, frozen. And then there is an enlightened businessman today that bought it and wishes to do something good also for the public. So you see there are going to be facilities for the municipalities that clearly are divided by the river, Celle Ligure on this side, Varazze on the other side, and we're making also here services for the shore and a restaurant, and the shore stays public. And we're going to make also here another residential building, so you have a little bit of orientation. And here you see the plan. So even if it is reinterpreted tradition, it is almost an industrial construction with this pillar allowing the flexibility. But more interesting for me always is what moves things. and it is culture. Because indeed buildings host stories very far in time and space. For sure you know these watercolors by Schinkel. It was 1830, and he drew a series of drawings which are imaginative representations of classical Roman villas. They are drawings of invention in which Schinkel imagines the spaces of Mediterranean idleness. He represents Villa di Plinio, as you see here, starting from the text of a letter of the young Plinio to a friend. So he has no drawing as a reference. He has only this continuous storytelling that he follows, and from this imagination of a sequencing of a room, a fountain, a garden, comes out this project of a villa. And I find wonderful to discover how the disposition of an experience of landscape is orchestrated through disposing sequences of rooms of diverse proportions as a double-sided scenography, so that the outdoor and the landscape are part collaborating with the indoor of the space. And there the question is, what is landscape? How do we experience landscape? On one side, spaces live as individual scenes, and the outdoor is completed by the interior. On the other, the interior spaces reveal the exterior space, addressing a bigger scale of landscape. And this is what we're trying to do with a garden here, which is all oriented towards the valley that you recall from the maquette before, and it is the theater garden. So it's not just a pot of greenery. It is a collaboration with the scale of the complete valley. Or we have the artifice of a palace garden, or we have an exotic garden on the roof here, or we have the representative garden terrace overlooking the sea. The experience of landscape seems thus to live in that unpredictable shift of perception of the different scales. The interior and the exterior, the garden and the surrounding lands, and in evoking and dreaming again and again dreams and passions that are past. This is the sketch of the new coming residential project, the one on the hill. Would you imagine that this plan is one same apartment moved in orientation? Can you recognize it? It could be an historical plan, like of an historical city center of a borgo. And so that is what we're trying to reach, to achieve, a kind of archaeology of dreams, around and around. Here you see the terrace in the roof plan, and this comes very badly projected. I apologize. It's a very fine drawing. No, this I go fast. I apologize. And in all of this, the question is, and it's also hosted in the exhibition, why do our societies are so uncomfortable with the word continuity? Why is there this pressure for novelty? You have to be new, not even present or modern. It has to be new and it has to break. Why do our societies are troubled with the word continuity? Continuity. Is it taking away freedom? Is it taking away chance of growth? If the character that we may attempt to name the cultural expression of cities has transformed over time, shortly, Baroque city, Gothic city, classic city, it's how we also speak when we go to the grocery to say, I went on holiday here or there, No? So there is a character to the built environment, which is not only one-sided color, it is a melange of colors. So if the character, which is a cultural expression of different societies and time, is weaving in our build, I have to move. I'm not professional, as you see, I'm learning. I apologize. If the character is this cultural expression which is layered and combined in all our built environment, meaning most of our daily scene, I ask, is it possible to recognize permanencies in the cultural structure of cities? I'm proposing a reading. Character reflects the changes of societies, but there is a cultural structure that is preserved, and it's what people, all different people, from all these century millennia, has reinvested of meaning, and therefore has survived until now. That is what we are interested on working with, on, and for. We are not interested in hunting a sense of newness. We are neither interested in hunting a sense of historicism. We are interested in being alive and questioning and reactive as a cultural actor with our practice, as well as citizens and teachers and craftsmen. And I have to ask Arno, because I think I'm going long. Are you very bored? Can you resist? Positivo? No one fainting or running away. Good. Good. So it is this attempt tries to offer a passing over the contrast and conflict between traditions and modernities, and wishes to propose a higher maturity, higher cultural maturity in recognizing that human culture exists of melanges, of contradictions and of paradoxes, but it is clear what people made survive through centuries, and it has not only one language, it has not only one form, it has not only one voice of culture, and that is the wonder of human being. So how do we orient in this? How do we recognize what people made worth survive and reinvested of meaning? It's an open question for us too. Other way to formulating, and here I am quoting Fernand Braudel again with his proposition of la longue durée. Is it not having been? Is it not having been precisely a condition for being and for inventing our future? Because it's self-evident that our future does not exist. No. Someone says that we are this glimpse between the yesterday and the tomorrow, and that's our present, which is always in movement. No, which is Heraclitean in a way, but we are now in Tuscany. And Casadue in Sorano, this village where also Arno came, which is perched up on a tufa hill in Tuscany and is surrounded by the river Lente in all a landscape of a sort of more wilder Mediterranean landscape of chestnuts, not the Siena soft landscapes. There was a very, very small plot which was here, well, is here, which was dedicated to host rabbits and chicken. But it is insisting on the noble wall of Sorano. And from a distance, all the silhouette seems almost to redraw the topography, the existing topography, while when you are inside the village, it is a labyrinthian meander of mazes, alleys, because people carved the tufa block to have stone blocks to build their own houses. And this somehow follows. And very often you can recognize that in historical cities. And you see here the new house, which is really a holiday house, very tiny, 75 square meters, minuscule, does not contradict the posture, the cultural structure, how I try to call, of the place, what survived. So that the roofs follow the topography and reveal the alley. It is in sound masonry with a very, well, nothing of mortar. And there was nothing historical building because mortar was more expensive than the stone. And it's much more elegant instead of seeing those cakes where you have all the tufa placed inside the mortar. Then how do you do it today feasible when you have a very, very thin plot? All the study was to invent a way of building which is to stretch a series of rooms, all chained one with the other, and the construction is experimental construction of tufa, where there's nothing special. Dry construction just with this metal structure, which is basically applying tension to the tensor. The tensor is connected to the vertical pole. Here you see. So tensor connected here and here. This is a circle you saw before, hooks the tufa, and so suddenly, since this happens for all the layers of the stone, you have hands closing the structure. And so you can have only 250 millimeter, which is 250, so very tiny, with no insulation, because tufa has air, is a volcanic stone. So no need for insulation, just inside a little bit of gentleness, where you are more naked with your body, and you don't see almost anything of the construction, but the construction is not hidden, it's just well thought, distributing the loads. So the construction is not historicist, but it does belong to the tradition of the place. It does belong to the construction. And also, yet, it is a modern way of living. As you see, they are so contiguous, the rooms, that you feel almost like living on a balcony. Very different from the structure of sequencing of rooms, traditional vernacular rooms, where the openings are so small in relation to the, I wanted to go here, to the rooms that you will perceive a hole in the wall, while here you feel the flow of the space. But the goal was to belong to the place and not be loud. I could say it's a constant. We appreciate force, dignity, and non-loudness. And the question is it possible to belong to tradition with the tools of production of present time? Laser cut steel. Again. I apologize. Laser cut steel, water jet cut stone, and all of those, you have them up, they are trapezium. I don't know if you all saw the exhibition. August, maybe you can take the tufa block, so we make it a little. So basically it is making an interlock just 30 millimeter to 0. So it's very simple. Esatto. So to have on one side the aligned joints, no, like Viterbo. These are the walls of Viterbo. It's not that if something is just in Bolzano or Trento, we don't remember, no? Viterbo is like at 20 minutes from Sorano. People very often go there. There's a kind of continuity, and that's what we work on. So we wanted to be noble and tiny on the historical walls, but to have this. This makes sense in Viterbo because you have tufa blocks which are of 60 centimeters, 1 meter, totally falling into a mess of historical rubbish. Mud, broken pots, mortar, and so on, that now is earth. You have like 3 meters or 5 of wall. The plot was 5 meters, so no possibility to inhabit. This is only 250. To do this and have this expression, to be noble in that context, then, we turn. You see, here we have 60, 180. Here we had 120. This means that all the layers are woven. For nothing, we don't need much. So, question, do we always need muscles? We need more intelligence than muscles. Oi! And you see how porous it is. And thank you, August. And in this sense, drawings help a lot. On one side, drawings help to study. They help to study the wonders and the beauty done. I think we never invent anything. There is always a solution already there. It is just with another language, another material, another way. And drawings help us also to transfer instructions to builders and to establish a civilized talk on how do we optimize money, also how do we optimize the endeavor of my poor arm or my poor neck of the builder. Also, drawing helps to multiply, reveal and evoke dreams of others, to share a belonging, even if I'm Italian and you are from, you have other stories, no? Still we can share. And this is Tenda. It's a stone pavilion that was made for Marmo Mac, and as you see, it is based on stereotomy. So, no clamps, no mortar, nothing, just the cut of stone. John Rusking, this is a wonderful drawing from the Lamp of Truth, which is in chapter, it is the chapter 2, where Ruskin redraws himself the lintel of the dome of Prato, where those fantastic unknown masonry men had made, oh dear, I did wrong, had made this wonder. They wanted to have a decorated lintel because it's a portal. It speaks for the community. It represents the community. It has to be a feast. When they go to the cathedral, they have to be safe and protected, to find storytellings and also be alphabetized and also share a fabulation, a myth. So it had to be decorated. Stone, a little bit expensive. Can we have a big one and sculpt it? No, we make with small stone. Aha! How do we make a lintel of, it's approximately so, the lintel. How do we do it with small stones? Genius Anonymous. They made one which is to trapezium. It's one piece, but interlocking piece. And Tenda simply copies that thought. So for the lintels, it was so important. Tenda in Italian is a tent. It had to be an homage for Castelvecchio, a memory of the tomb of Cancan della Scala. Then Castelvecchio moved, so there was all a part of giving homage to a great mind and architect. And it had to be a stone construction having the gentleness and lightness of a textile construction. So we very much needed that the lintel would not be a too dominant piece, organizable piece, but to be part of the decor, as Ruskin noted in Prato. And so this is the solution. And there is this wonderful question that Ruskin poses with his drawing, which is, are necessity and logic sufficient matters for building? Necessity, I need to cover a span. Logic, I use a big piece. Is it enough for building? Clearly, we don't think so. And in that sense, there is a part which relates to a long story, and that was very strongly expressed by an Italian group in the 50s. I mean, so strongly expressed that may die, the Tiam, forever, for good, then they were done. And it was in 1955, there was a publication, it was 59, if I recall correctly, the last meeting, where there was the wonder on traditional architecture in Italy, but the question was, these people had lost, like other countries, so many dear people. They were wounded by World War II. In Italy, it was a very, very, very severe civil war. And there was the need for some figuration, some search for identity, a sort of secular fabulation or myth. An identity where modern movement was not enough. Question, am I inappropriate, wrong, or blaspheme if I am happy with the column? Am I blaspheme if I am happy with the Cathedral of Prato from Middle Age, and I'm not entitled to do the practice with maturity if le plan livre is not enough for me? And it's surprising how this question is vivid and fierce today as well, no? When we have this heritage of wonderful modern movement that is splendid because we took a stand for better conditions of life, but then, as very often happens, no, good thoughts, when they are set into a manifesto and become a sort of secular religion, then they lose their reason to be, or they become distorted. So, in that moment, the question was, how can we combine present means, so responding and corresponding modern movement, together with a need of representation, figuration. I prefer to call it fabulation, which has been recurring in so many time and ages. And it is not an act of Beaux-Arts, style exercise like Queneau did. In Padova, for example, this is my diploma project. Padova is a very beautiful city. There is the Oppidum, well, there is the Cardecumano, medieval Oppidum, which has a wondrous set of historical wall. Then there was the jump with Venetians, and then expanded a little bit. There is a river crossing, clearly, and then there were also all the beautiful 19th century hydraulic works to bonify the area which were non-salubar. But focusing here, there is all a beautiful structure of public buildings which were in part secular, in part religious, as in all historical cities happen. And at the time, it was a time where they were speaking about a lot, the debate. I read in 2000. It was a time of Paul Virilio, what is the junk space or no space, and so on. And I simply thought that public space was something good, but I was struggling to find a meaning for it. So I was wondering, who can use the public space if less people go to the square, if not to the market or to a cafe? When there are manifestations which are less seldom, when there is not, when people buy the newspaper today, even don't buy the newspaper but read on the iPhone, but before there was a man reading to everybody the newspaper in the street, and you could have a person with, no? So what a sense. And they found the sources in the foreign communities that were already there since 3 generations. So beautifully, thanks to migration, there is always fresh costumes, I would say, fresh blood, fresh culture and energy, which makes them the best everywhere. And with this, I wanted to work with buildings in stone, because they were the material and language of all the infrastructure on the river, that at the time was just a backyard. It was abandoned, full of rubbish. So I wished to do that, inventing a way of building that would be tuning with the context. So how can I reinterpret an antique lead brace today in a way that expresses meaning? And that was a proposal. So a dry stone construction in Trachite Zovonite of the Euganei, the hills called Euganei, which are baby volcanoes, so volcanoes that did not grew up very much. And so you see the stone is very, very, very dense and has some intrusions of iron. This means that you can use it to build in slabs of 100 millimeter. So the construction was a castle of cards, all fixed with those brass with TIG castoning welding, which means structural, that would keep in place the cross slabs, and then there was a pure aluminum to distribute the load. But why all this effort? Because I wished to continue what had survived on the channel of Padova, a construction in Trachite in Pietra But I wanted to do it in a reasonable, feasible, economical way today, and with meaning, public buildings representation. What you can see here is that the expression of the facade seems the opposite of tectonic. Tradition, big blocks down, small blocks up, because they are smaller on top, smaller mass, bigger mass down, barycenter down. In this case, follows the tonic, because smaller the pieces are, more cross parts you have. So you look, it looks the other way around of the world. Tectonic, the load follows law of gravity. Here you see the cavity walls with the load, and here you see all the plans, so of each layer of stones. And the question here, when it is simply a simple ensemble of rooms of Trachite Zovonite, is which tools can we dispose to be part of a city that already exists, that exists before us, our parents, our grandparents, and our grand-grandparents, and that still can have meaning for people alive today and the one alive tomorrow and after tomorrow. Here we have the Tower Observatory of Galilei. How can we weave this dialogue without being a dead language, a dead mind, a dead practice? Kitsch. We are in Guilin, and now we are in China. And Guilin is literally a fairy tale landscape. It is, and its origin, it's fascinating because it was India and Asia colliding 40 million years ago. And from this collision came those karst peaks, all weathered and tempered by the waters, rainwater and flowing water. And it's enchanting. I never saw anything like that in my life. Along the river, there is a continuous broadery of bamboos that reach the height of 16 meters. And along the river, from time to time, you encounter, here, and there, sometimes a carving in the stone, which is meant to be seen only from the river. And those are stories carved in stone. It is truly ancient oral culture. And sometimes there are small towers which are meant to transfer messages from meander to meander, or to be a signal of distances, like a meter for traveling. And we were invited to make a small library pavilion, which was meant to be in this border of bamboo, here, to serve as a library for the children of the village nearby here, gathering some benefit of income from a hotel for theater directors and actors, so VIPs, very important people, and combine sources to bring some benefit to the teacher of the village. And we supported and became part of this lore. We made a tower. And this dodecagonal building has a core of prevented concrete, which is developed on a first floor because the ties arrive until here of the river, so to make safe, and then develops into a spiral staircase up to the top where you are, reach the belvedere, from where you overlook over the bamboo and you can see the river. At the base there is a cryptoporticus where children may play while they await the teacher to come, and up cryptoporticus, you enter, you go up, you reach and go out here in the staircase. All those are the shelves of the books. Here are the niches for the teacher to sit and gather around the children. Or can be, we all a terrace out, so also children can be out but protected under the eye, or can be a gathering for, as said, for those actors, filmmakers and guests of the nearby facility. And the interesting part for us was to weave this lore, be part of the cultural structure where there is a presence in the landscape which has survived. Towers, fragile towers along the river make sense because it is something that makes community and also foreigner recognize that place as that place. And then there is this meandering, this space. It's totally non-traditional. It's a continuous weaving of spaces where there is an assonance or it's better to say a dialogue with the niches of shade and light of the wood of bamboo. But it's also a place where children have a size together. Children don't really like gigantic places. They need a place to make home. And then there is abundance of bamboo. So bamboo is a kind of superhero material, is very frightened if you cut his fiber vertical, and very frightened of insect. That's why in tradition, but in China and Japan, they are dyed with prunes. Now we're going to do it with not prunes, but with a chemical, and the principle is all knotted bamboo, and that man you saw before is part of a family with whom we are developing the prototypes, so that we would make, like making a boat where there is knowledge and tradition, you assemble part of the facade and then you bring them up and you mount it. You assemble bigger pieces on site. They're very light. Bishan is still in the center, but more southern than Yaoshua, and here we are at the feet of the Yellow Mountain, and it's the villages here. There are some historical villages which are the villages of the merchants, because they were founded by merchants, and they're all gathering at the feet of the mountains like a broderie. And they appear like those long lime white walls and these lines of dark gray tiles. They are a dozen, but 3 are the major ones. And it was founded in the 14th century, so a little bit the low Middle Age, as a maze of houses and ancestor temples. Halls, which means they were secular. They were not with a goddess, something divine. They were ancestors. And all this maze of wider courts, wider patio courts and rooms, smaller patios, were then converged in a bigger patio where all was about gathering the rainwater to store it. So that makes sense. So you have a kind of language of and a sizing of spaces, which is always a combination of necessity, logic, but also something more, which is, how do we call it? Human dignity. Sounds more believable than culture, which is afar. And in this ancestor hall, at the border of the village Haijiu, we were invited to make a proposal for a dance school, which were combining traditional performing dances and also Pina Bausch experiments, because there was a disciple of, a pupil, disciple is very wrong with Pina Bausch, a pupil of Pina Bausch that was Chinese and was going in between Paris and Haijiu. And here we wanted to preserve all those buildings of the 50s, which were simply delightful, as the rooms for dancing. And then this is the ancestor hall, and then creating all here a new scene where you would multiply endlessly the double face scene of indoor and outside, but also stage and audience. So wherever, that's the core of Pina Bausch, wherever you can tell a story and wherever you can speak about life, dancing. And it was starting from a pillar which was a mineral translation of a wood culture of building, because in China and also Japan, availability of woods were short, so they developed a virtuosism in making joints because woods were short, and that created a kind of expression, and we wished to dialogue with that, also if it is concrete. So the pillar creates a rhythm, a pacing, it structures spaces, it builds the scenography double face. And in that sense, it also builds a fabulation, which is not local or vernacular. It is precise, but non-specific. It's not footnoting a culture. Neither it is illustrating a culture. And there was in Les Sacs Tempes, by Stravinsky, I love because there is a bassoon which is combining different themes. There is a popular theme of shepherds on the mountain. There is an Italian popular song, and there is also some melody from Tibet. So our way of associating memories and visions is always very precise, but is free. And me and I are interested in these distant dialogues. I come now to the end, and I hope you're not fainting. This will go quick. This is what we have on the table now. We are handing in this competition Tuesday. It's only 2 invited competition. We are in Piemonte, and Piemonte in... I'm also tired, it's not coming the name. It will come. Monferrato, ecco, the region. Belveglio is the place. In Monferrato, it is a soft landscape which is highly cultivated. It's a place of old Barolo, so grapeyards. And there is a specificity of landscape that you have many rural construction which are distant from each other, with some assonances to also the countryside portrayed by Morandi. And there are some castles which were the defense point, guaranteeing protection to all those small vernacular structures. We have been invited to make art residencies for artists and atelier for artists for Massimo De Carlo, that you may know. It is the most important, relevant Italian gallerist, which has a gallery in Milano, another in London, another in Tokyo. And we have as pre-existency a kind of a castle by an architect, which is Valerio Olgiati, which is quite a sober, silent, and walled square. And we wished to respect the castle in a way elongating the storytelling of all the landscape around. And so to be so tiny with our construction and have only 3 small secular chapels or rural facility, while all the house atelier is underground, but with a patio. We have an existing production facility that we reinvent, but this is how we work. So it starts from measuring the space and finding a theme. Those are the residencies. We see them after. This is a staircase of access from where you see up. So this is a house. That staircase, you go down here, and all these spaces are around the patio with here a chimney and sometimes a view towards the landscape. So the theme was to not make the atelier for working and the place where to live, but concatenate spaces with different quality of light and shadow around the patio so that the artist could make home, because you can have people who are shy, need quiet to work, others need a lot of crowd, others need to come with a family, others with a friend. Some need to cover every corner with threads or colors, and so on. And the house is a solar watch. It's all in casted double shell concrete, so we may host all the installation in between. The concrete is only 105 millimeter, and it's pigmented with, in the scaffolding, some textiles, so that we may have some gentleness in the surface, while the floors are in remnant earth. In the landscape, you see, we have the castle by architect Olgiati, and then we have those 3 teeny tiny constructions. Quickly, plans. The section. The section, they accompany the existing topography. We have a restaurant and a bar, we have a hall, but all it's a chamber to overlook the landscape, but mostly when people look at you, to be part of that landscape. as conclusion, I would like to bring you back to what is so relevant to us. As you see, we are not enchanted or flirty with too much philosophy, or we are interested in things that become real, in materials. But we're also interested in asking what is the sense of our work? Why do we do what we do? Why do we make buildings? Why is it important to make buildings? And also because we build for people that we mostly don't know, and hopefully for people to come that we will never for sure know. And Leon Battista Alberti wrote that the purpose of architecture is to provide beauty as well to satisfy necessity. And it is true that for centuries all arts have had the goal of beauty through mastering technique, but it is strange that today society seems to address beauty as something subjective, an aesthetic, a transient aesthetic, a subjective aesthetic. And we wonder if beauty could not be readdressed as a collective dignity, the decor of citizens. And the question is, how can we, architects, serve this sense of dignity? Thank you.